TNJRadio show. Good evening, folks. Good evening. We're going to have a great show today. I'm one part half of the group, Laraun J.
William A. Thomas in the building.
Yeah, man. How you feeling, man? How you feeling today?
Oh, man, I'm feeling great, man. A little warmer up here in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Down here, man, it was pretty nice, man. I had the sunroof open, out here feeling the breeze.
What now? You guys down there? What type of temps you guys talking about right now?
Yeah, well, man, it's cold right now. We get 4 seasons around this time. Right now it's about 64, but it was about 80, 70, 79 today.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's cold. That's the problem with you Southern folks. You guys are like amphibians. Y'all be down there talking about 60 degrees. It's cold. Man, we would love to have 60 degrees up here.
We don't normally do this, but today we're going to have a real hot show, man. So if you on social media, if you're on YouTube, get those likes up, man, because Facebook is playing games. They're not even the people who have a notification click, they're not even showing it, man. So definitely get those likes up. Get in the comments. Start putting them comments down so we can get this video out. But today, man, it's just interesting, man, because we have a world that's divided. One side want it their way, and the other side want it their way. The government's trying to take our civil liberties away from us. So this is a huge show for us because we're sitting here trying to set a trend. So, and also we appreciate the people who supporting us. Hit up that cash out real quick like this, but thank you for the donations, because without you, we can't do what we're doing, and we're trying to bring it to another level. So we appreciate the support that we're getting, and continually getting. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been getting a lot more support, lately. Definitely shout out. I know we were going to shout some of them out earlier, but one of our bigger donors, Joe out of Braddock, so definitely appreciate it.
Also, we want to give a shout out to Fawn
Nanji.
Yes,
man, that guy, he's been one of the supporters since the beginning.
Facts. Also, we want to give a shout out to Swanee G. Always supporting the channel, man. Supporting financially, and also he gives his knowledge on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Initially, whenever you had actually introduced me to, or whenever you had came on, I was sitting there, thinking like, man, this guy got these fisherman hats and stuff like that. But what I found out is that, when you get to rock them type of hats, that's because you got some knowledge in there, and you don't want to let the sun fry your brain. So, Swanee G, definitely a sharp dude, married for longer than, some people's kids have been born. They're older.
Facts. That's a whole fact, nothing but a fact. All right, so let's get to it, man. Let's hit this monologue.
Yeah, absolutely. But all right, guys, now there is a war going on, okay? What do you most think of when you're talking about war? What? Nations against nation? World wars? What about civil wars? Wars between the people who already lived there. We had one of the bloodiest conflicts just over about 150 years ago. We think of soldiers risking their lives, usage of weaponry. We think of conflict, whether guns, knives, muskets, the little gun, the rifles with the sticks at the end. We think of rockets, and certain times spears, axes, bows, and arrows. What about the atomic bomb, nuclear warheads? We think of generals leading their prospective armies when we're thinking about war. But tonight, we're going to be talking about a different war. This one is going to hit a little bit closer to home. This isn't one that you can necessarily watch on your television screens, but this is one that you may or may not be actively engaged in. The war is for our children. There are forces looking to take control of our children's minds, body, and souls. Do I sound a little bit dramatic? Well, we'll let you be the judge of that. But in today's climate, parents must be no less than tough warriors when it comes to our children. In times past, kids had to actually go to other places to be negatively influenced. In times past, parents could keep a close eye and monitor, their environment. They could make sure that their kids went to church, school, kept them at home, safe places, right? Who remembers having to come in when the street lights are on? I do. I had to be on that porch. But negative influences might come from friends, sometimes distant relatives. But in those times, it was a whole lot easier to be able to drown out those influences. You could actually separate your kids from that. Today is a whole lot different. We have advances going on in technology. With the advance of cell phones, remember the old cell phones back in the day? You had to have the little bag. If you had a cell phone, back in the day in like the 80s or 90s, first off, you were probably rich. But I digress. But the cell phones have went from being these big, blocky things, then to the ones that kind of look like a remote control. Anyone had that Nokia? I did. It was terrible. And then we moved to text messaging. To now, we have the internet being available on our kids' cell phones. They have tablets. They have personal computers. Before, to be able to get on a computer, most of the time you have to go to school. Anyone remember the logo program that grew up at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s? Turtle, put in the little controls and it went forward. Well, Turtle has pretty much moved into hyperdrive. We're way far advanced. Now we are in a state where kids have access to movies. They have access to TV shows and other things. But that's also another example of influences that may be outside coming in. But one of the ones that we don't actually think of is the unexpected war. Every day, we send our children, most of us, to our different schools, whether public or private, whether Christian, Catholic, whatever it would actually be. The teachers there, we trust that they are going to teach our kids in the arts and the sciences. We know that and expect that they're going to be able to learn math, reading, some of the skills that are necessary to be able to have a basic level of understanding and success within the world. Because who would know that it would probably be a challenge to be able to go out there and not be able to read? It would probably be a challenge if you had money and you go to pay for something and you don't know how much it actually costs. You don't know how much to give. You don't even know how much you're supposed to get back. Or in the sciences, we have debates going on and some people disagree in regards to whether the world is flat or not. We're not going to really go too far into that, but we need to know how electricity works, because electricity when used correctly, can be able to power a home, to be able to give light to a neighborhood, a country, to be able to help us all. But used incorrectly can actually kill you. So these are the things that we expect to send our children to be able to learn. But in recent times, not so far away, our children have been introduced to certain theories. The current buzzword of today, we may have heard of critical race theory. Has anyone heard of that? Absolutely. And what is critical race theory? You know, that question for a lot of people is a really tough one to be able to answer, because most people haven't went to law school, which is where critical race theory actually started out of. But what we're going to end up going into, and we have a special guest who will be able to explain all of that information in more detail. But what we'll actually get into is not only if they are actually teaching it in the schools, but how and what is the effect of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Laraun J. He's going to put on some, a brief video.
All right. Give me 1 second. So Tony Kinnett is a science coordinator at the Indianapolis School in Indiana, and he is also the founder of Chalkboard Review. You may have seen this viral video circulating on social media. So just give me a second to pull that up, and then we'll get him on 1 second. Yeah. All right, here we go right here. Hold up 1 second.
Good old technology.
Yes, exactly. There you go.
I'm the science coach and admin in the largest public school district in Indiana. I'm in dozens of classrooms a week, so I see exactly what we're teaching our students. When we tell you that schools aren't teaching critical race theory, that it's nowhere in our standards, that's misdirection. We don't have the quotes and theories as state standards per se. We do have critical race theory in how we teach. We tell our teachers to treat students differently based on color. We tell our students that every problem is a result of white men, and that everything Western civilization built is racist, capitalism as a tool of white supremacy. Those are straight out of Kimberly Crenshaw's main points, verbatim in Critical Race Theory, the writings that formed the movement. This is in math, history, science, English, the arts, and it's not slowing down. If students of color have lower reading scores, it's because of inequity. Therefore, we take from the white students and give to the colored students. That's Richard Delgado, straight out of CRT in Introduction. All teaching is political, with reality and facts taking the back seat. That's Billings, who outlined how she saw critical race theory fleshed out in public schools in 1995. When schools tell you that we aren't teaching critical race theory, it means one thing: go away and look into our affairs no further. It isn't about transparency, it isn't about cultural relevance, it's race essentialism, painted to look like the district cares about students of color. We call it anti-racism, so you feel bad if you disagree with our segregationist pedagogy. It's taking advantage of kids' vulnerability and parents' inactivity to preen over social snake oil schemes designed to create division. Parents, when we tell you critical race theory isn't taught in our schools, we're lying. Keep looking.
All right. No further ado. Let me stop that video. Let's get Mr. Tony Kinnett online. How's it going?
It's going. How you guys doing?
Fantastic, fantastic. watching that video, man. I see you going viral right here.
Yeah, it kind of took us by surprise, that's for sure.
Hold on, let me Mr. Thomas's thing is muted. Give me a second. All right, you're back, Will. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm gonna just move you around here, Tony. Is that a better seat?
Oh, front and center. Oh, I'm honored. I appreciate it. I'm certainly not worth all that.
Yeah. So when I actually came across this video, I was actually, on YouTube surfing through a number of things, and I believe your video had actually came up on one of the channels that I regularly watch, Anthony Brown Logan, and I was sitting there like, who's this guy? And then next thing you know, you were on Fox News, like the next day.
Yeah, it moves pretty quickly. I wasn't even aware that the video was on YouTube for a while. I was getting messages asking if I could, if it was okay if they downloaded the video and uploaded it to YouTube and uploaded it to Facebook, which is funny because I run a media organization that normally would do that, but it even took us by surprise. I was on the phone actually with a friend of mine when it jumped from like 100 likes to like 500 likes in about 4.5 minutes. And that was when I knew. I actually told my boss later that afternoon, I was like, yeah, I'm going to need the afternoon off because I'm not going to be able to pay attention to my work. So I went home and the calls started coming in, and it's been a wild, I don't know what 96 hours, how long ever it's been.
Yeah.
So Tony, what made you make the video?
Well, I actually released a lot of this information a month prior, and a lot of people don't know that. So I'm the science coordinator for the Indianapolis Public School District, and in my spare time, I'm an education policy journalist, have been for a long time, love education policy, love getting into political writing and commentary. And I've actually studied critical race theory for 8 years at the graduate level, and I have sat in on a lot of these professors' courses that are still teaching and auditing back when I was a education advisor for a governor of a Midwestern state. And I spent a lot of time just studying this. It was very interesting to me. I'm very passionate about the Hispanic community. I lived out of a lot of homes in the Hispanic community when I was in college. And so I was steeped in that culture. And so any implications of a student's skin color playing an impact in their education was very interesting to me, because if you know anything about Hispanic communities, no two households and no two students are the same just because they're brown. And so, a family from Guatemala is very, very, very different than a family from Mexico, and they will make sure that you know that. And so I was very interested in it in a long time in my graduate work. So to see a lot of people in the last couple of weeks, not just misrepresenting what critical race theory is, which, I mean, it's education. Stuff that I do is misrepresented all the time. That's like my job. But to hear people say that it didn't even exist at all, period, that it was some figment of my imagination, 8 years of my life just didn't happen. Well, that really just got on my nerves. It kind of hits the wrong nerve at the wrong time. And just with everything going down, a lot of stuff that my school was doing that I very strongly disagree with, finding out that I had at the time been treated differently than another staff member, just a few things that had really gotten under my skin, and how I was being treated differently because of my beliefs. And just basically the straw that broke the camel's back, and decided that it was time to start releasing some important information to the parents of Indianapolis. And turned out it was a whole lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, whenever you actually started on this journey of, releasing out the information, I guess at that time, was there ever any worry as far as how it would affect like your job status or anything like that?
So I get this question a lot, and the answer I give is no. There was never a moment where I was really nervous or afraid. God's given me a lot of peace about all of this. There's, been a lot of prayer. My wife and I've had a lot of conversations about it. There are a couple of other close friends that I've worked with in education policy and education journalism that we kind of walked through this before I just threw it up. Although I don't think anyone was expecting the quick 2-minute video that I recorded right before I went off to school. And basically that was how it worked. That morning I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to record it. And I sat down, turn on the lights. It's like 7 a.m. I'm bleary eyed. And I record the video and then I go edit it. My editing station's over to my right. And so as far as worry is concerned, I haven't really been worried through the whole thing. There are people who need to know what's going on, and there are words that need to be said. And I'm not trying to be noble. I just think that, my concerns here aren't what's important, or my concerns about what's going on with me, I should say, are not the most important thing.
Right. And this is really what we found is important. You had kind of alluded to it earlier. There's been a lot of misinformation, maybe miscommunication as far as exactly what critical race theory is. Some of it doesn't even matter which side it's actually coming from. Everyone seems to not know exactly what it is. So I wanted to give you the floor just to explain it. First off, what exactly is critical race theory?
Yeah, so no problem. After 8 years of studying this, hopefully I should be able to break this down. So when people say that it's a legal framework theory from upper graduate levels, no, it's not that complicated. Critical race theory is a lens. It is a lens with which you view mainly United States history. And it is a view of the United States history that says every single cause of every societal ill, every grief, every problem, every issue, every structure is steeped in white supremacy, and directed white supremacy at targeting specifically Black Americans. That is exactly what critical race theory is. Therefore, every single action, every single inequality, every single inequity is therefore a child of white supremacy in American society. And therefore, generationally, white individuals as a collective bear the blame for any issues of any other marginalized group. And by marginalized, we mean any group that isn't basically part of the minority in the actions and traditions received. So that is what critical race theory is. Now, it's often argued against that it's not taught in schools. It's this graduate legal framework. Well, yeah, the definition that I just gave, no one actually says, okay, class, here's what this is. Well, there's a lot of stuff in education, school, and master's programs and teacher college that we don't technically teach students. I was taught as a student teacher, here's how you give tests. Here's how you walk around the room and check that students are answering things, correctly, that you give help where it's needed. But I don't explain to students what I'm doing as I'm walking around the room. Okay, class, now next I'm going to be walking around the classroom and I'm going to be asking questions so that you guys remember certain things from the lesson. And I learned this in graduate school. No, but I still use those principles. So when I say what specifically critical race theory is, it is that lens, and that lens can be used in how you teach. And it often is. So when we say critical race theory is being used in education, 80% of the time, 3 out of 5 times, that means that it's in how we teach. Now, some critical race theory can directly be in the curriculum, which is like the 1619 project, which is the blatant falsification and the selective picking of certain data points to build a narrative, which Nicole Hannah-Jones and Howard Zinn have been called out on by a lot of historians for most of their working lives.
Interesting. Now,
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I have a question. Now, most left-wing politicians are saying that it's not in the schools. What would you say to parents if they're trying to figure out what's going on in the schools?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you are getting your talking points from a group of individuals who can't even collectively decide what critical race theory is, you're looking in the wrong place. The narrative has changed approximately 8 times in the last 3 months. Critical race theory is just history. Critical race theory is only taught in college. Critical race theory is only taught in high school. Critical race theory isn't taught in schools at all. Critical race theory is just in law school. Critical race theory doesn't exist. And it changes based on the day, based on the network, based on the person, based on the politician. So if they can't even decide what it is, guessing that's probably not your source. What I would suggest that you do is I would suggest you look at what your kids are bringing home. Because as a responsible parent, you really should be checking up on what your kids are learning in class. If anything else, it helps reinforce what they learned when you talk to them about what they learned in class today. That's good parenting. And so you look at what you're seeing, and if you see certain things in the assignments that are suggesting that white supremacy is a cause for things that white supremacy has no objective data for being a cause for, then yeah, that would be a function of critical race theory. The next thing you should do is you should talk to the teacher and you should ask questions. Don't go in storming and making accusations. I mean, unless it's like really gross. I mean, if a teacher sends home the book Gender Queer with your child, which is, includes a horrific image of one of the old men Greek philosophers fondling a child, yeah, then you should go in and you should accuse the teacher and you should storm and have a very angry conversation. But if you don't know for sure and something looks suspicious, just ask the teacher. I mean, parents would come in and ask me things all the time. I'd be very open and honest with them. Parents would come in and ask me things about other teachers, and I would be very forthcoming. I had teachers that were super far to the left that parents would come in and ask me about, and I would tell them what I knew, because I don't believe in hiding anything from parents. I am always about the facts over the narrative. Every time, no exceptions. So that's where I'd go first. If that doesn't work, you go to the principal. If he doesn't do anything, you go to the superintendent. If not that, I personally don't believe going and yelling at the school board does a whole lot. The school board doesn't care what you have to say. Sorry, that's just a fact of life that I hate. Elect a better school board. That's my answer.
Wow. I have one more question.
Bring it on.
Before you can end, Will. Now, are they having critical race theory in other subjects in your school, or is it just like social studies? Or
so it's saturated from K to 12, from kindergarten through 12th grade, every class, every course, it's saturated. And here's why. So do we have CRT curriculum in our school? Yes, we have social studies teachers that utilize the 1619 project in Howard Zinn. That is CRT curriculum, bar none, period. They are also using critical race theory pedagogy. And now I showed this in my video. You'll notice near the end of the video, I have a little tagline. You see me slide out the definition, anti-racism. And I slide that out really quickly. That comes from Indianapolis Public Schools, Black Lives Matter resolution and 1619 project resolution, in which they introduced critical race theory framework, aka that lens, into how they view everything in the district, period. It gave the Racial Equity Office a huge amount of authority. Now we all have to sit through lots of professional developments. We have to sit through racial equity training. And it's not racial equity training like you might think, like, hey, everyone is just a person on the inside, and our cultures and where we come from matter. That's not what these are about at all. You're forced to sit there for 2 or 3 straight work days and stare into the camera, because if you don't actively stare into the camera and nod along, you don't get credit for coming that day. And they browbeat you over how white people are responsible for every single problem in the United States. And therefore, when you're teaching, the only thing you need to be thinking about is your student's color. When we look at assessments, how students score on reading, we don't think about what, how many parents the kid has in the household, or how rough the neighborhood is, or the income level, or what the kid may be struggling with before we think about the color. Color always comes first. And when I say CRT is in public schools, K through 12, that's what I mean. Before you even step in the classroom, the teachers are instructed, you treat your kids as colors. You segregate and you make your lesson plans, your curriculum, culturally responsive pedagogy. Doesn't actually mean that I have more like East Side indie inner city curriculum. So like I would use their streets they would know in a math problem, like things that make sense to them. No, this means like you have a set of examples for your black kids, a set of examples for your brown kids, and a set of examples for your white kids.
Okay.
That is exactly what that means.
Okay. Now, periodically from time to time, we'll actually just throw a couple comments, that are coming in the comment section up. I saw one on here that was along the lines of something that probably would have came up anyway. And Ananga Nanji.
Great question.
It is teaching about redlining CRT or racial covenants.
So I'm going to need a little more context on racial covenants, but is teaching about redlining CRT? Absolutely not. That is an essential piece of history and about Jim Crowism. We should absolutely teach about it because it happened. And then the United States put in very specific policies and prosecuted very specific people and threw people in prison for a very long time. And in my opinion, should have been thrown a lot longer away for the practices of redlining. The United States further imposed very strict financial regulations on banks that would not give loans to certain areas that were known to have high concentrations of individuals of color. I think we should be teaching that to our students. Why? Because it's history. No narrative, just the facts. What actually exactly happened, and then what happened afterward. So you don't just teach redlining, you teach what the United States did to rectify it, because that's important. It shows that the United States is making progress. You don't just teach the first half of the civil rights movement, how depressing and sad, and what a mockery to the leaders of the civil rights movement. You teach the entire thing. You talk about its ups, its downs, things that stuck, things that didn't, work that still needs to be done today. You don't lie. You don't stop the story short because it doesn't sound as sales worthy. Kids deserve the full picture, so do parents. So absolutely. And as far as teaching about the difficult moments in history, I actually learned about the Trail of Tears. So I am, unlike a lot of young white girls who will say, well, I'm just, I'm 16% Cherokee, and so I really value my heritage. I'm actually a significant portion Native American. And for all intents and purposes, that means that I would like that our nation knows a little bit about some of the atrocities that occur, not because I have some kind of vendetta, but because, again, it's just history. My small, it wasn't actually all that white, but my small, mostly white Christian school in rural Indiana did a far better, and if I might say, a more grotesque job, or a better job of explaining the grotesque details of the Trail of Tears and other horrible things about that time in our history than any of my education courses and education history classes when I was attending public university courses later on, or any high school history teacher I've observed. So as far as what I've seen, it actually appears to be the conservatives that are hitting the really rough and ugly moments of history, because we have so much more to rise above.
Wow.
So this moves into, I guess, the bigger question, which you covered a lot of it. A lot of times, and you pretty much covered it, but a lot of times you'll hear people say that no, CRT is just teaching history and the impact of slavery on the country.
Right.
So, I mean, as far as with, slavery and the impact, you as an educator, do you have any issue with teaching all the aspects, of it?
So again, it's really important to define the difference between teaching history and how you teach history. And the example I really like to use here is something that I just saw a couple of weeks ago at Crispus Attucks High School, which is one of our larger high schools at IPS. There was a history teacher who was comparing the policies and the prescriptions and the writings of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And by putting the two up against each other, he listed a lot of things that they did, things that they suggested, the different ways that they were trying to accomplish all of the things that those two tried to accomplish in the very early, in the parts of the Reconstruction era. What I found really interesting while I was watching him teach is how much this white man in his early 30s, despised Booker T. Washington. So much so that he was trying to lead his students to also get really pissed at Booker T. Washington just because he didn't like him and he didn't think that the policies that Booker T. Washington suggested were good. He effectively, and really all but in name, called Booker T. Washington an Uncle Tom. And when a student said, well, I don't know, I understand where Booker T. Washington was coming from. Sure, you may not like how his policies weren't like radical in the sense that they changed a lot, not radical as in bad, but like you may not like that his policies were radical, but I mean, he was trying to do what he thought was best for his friends and family in the community. And the teacher didn't accept the answer. And he was like, yeah, but don't you think that Booker T should have done more? And that's what I mean. So that's not teaching history. That's saying you must think exactly how I think, or you don't like these individuals as much as I do. Well, look, when the white guy starts lecturing the young black girl on how she should feel about other black people, I'm starting to draw a little bit of an issue with that. I don't think that it's up to anyone, it's especially not up to me, to provide you a set of historical points and then tell you how you should feel about those. And not in a school setting that's funded by taxpayer money, for sure. I mean, if the state's paying for that education, I don't believe that I should be giving you my narrative politically. That's not right. And not from a conservative basis either. I don't believe in omitting parts of our history to make America look like the most, some magical angel's breath through history.
Stuff.
Okay. Yeah, good response. Now, Kirby from Georgia, he had asked, does CRT address global issues or just the United States?
So the answer is, this is where it gets really sticky for the scholars of critical race theory. And this is where I really want to go up to Ibram X. Kendi and hand him a globe and also a couple books, because he needs to do some reading. But a lot of the scholars of critical race theory, so he's one of the modern, or I would almost say postmodernist critical race theorists, so much that a lot of them don't claim him. They try to incorporate some things in the world, but they kind of can't, because that pesky history keeps coming back to bite them in the rear. So you can say across Western civilization, so the NATO countries, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Western Germany to a degree, you can say there are still all of these elements of white supremacy, and it's really bad for anyone. But then you actually go over to the UK and you don't see that. And there's like not those issues present. In Australia, it's a completely different dynamic. That doesn't follow through. And then when you actually get into the nations in which phenotypically means like white looking individuals aren't the majority, it doesn't work in the other way, which according to critical race theory suggests that the primary social group is going to rule. It's actually a very Slavic, Eastern European, Soviet bloc idea, which is one of the reasons it's so apt to be called Marxist. It's really weird that none of the other countries in the world actually follow their trends for human psychology, but yet suddenly we get to the United States and it works. The other reason they don't really consider the rest of the world and CRT doesn't work is because it completely erases the Hispanic community. It completely, unless we're saying the word Latinx, no one ever mentions Hispanic individuals and like where they come from and their thoughts and beliefs in regards to intersectionality. So as far as the rest of the world, it kind of falls apart. It's really a more anti-Western civilization thing, and that usually hits hardest in the United States.
Okay. Now, you had talked about curriculum. And, I hear this word thrown around a lot in the education sectors. Just for those who don't know, what is the difference between curriculum and pedagogy?
Okay, I got you. And I'm glad you asked that question, because through this entire thing, if people learn the difference between these two terms, I'm a happy man. I mean, I also want parents in Indianapolis to know exactly what's being taught so they can choose to leave or stay. But other than that, curriculum is what's being taught. So, for example, let's say that I'm teaching my students about D-Day in 1944. Now, I'm a science teacher, but I'm also kind of a history nerd, as you may have guessed. If I'm teaching my students about D-Day, the stuff that is in this book is the curriculum. It is the material. It is what I am teaching them. It is the historical facts and data. It's all about, the beaches of Normandy, where things were fought, when, what led up to it. What is not curriculum is what's called pedagogy. So the curriculum is the stuff, like the hard material. Pedagogy is simply how it's taught. It's the method. It's how I get my students to think about D-Day. It's the atmosphere that I choose to set in the room. Maybe I have the lights all off and I have artillery background playing when they come in. And so it's kind of scary and it's going to be really ominous. Maybe, I play sounds. If you wanted to really make things wild and weird, you could play audio from like a German-esque French occupation village, and then you can tell the tale of D-Day as a scared German soldier, and you can get your students to think the other way. If you tell a bunch of sixth graders a story from the perspective of a scared German soldier on D-Day, the students are going to think a little differently about D-Day than if you're following the young 15-year-old soldier that's getting off the boat and charging in. Like you get kind of like where I'm going with that. That's the idea. So pedagogy is how you frame it, how you teach it. Curriculum is the actual stuff. So when a lot of schools are like, well, critical race theory is not in our curriculum, maybe that's going to get really nuanced. That's one of my favorite education buzzword. It just means difficult really quickly. But pedagogy, yeah, it's all throughout there because it's how you teach.
All right.
Good stuff.
Now, did you have anything, Laraun?
He answered a lot of my questions that I had.
I guess
Very thorough.
what is there that anyone who wants to know about CRT, or what is there that anyone should know that maybe we didn't cover?
I would suggest that you don't take my word for it. Really, I would suggest that you hear me explaining this stuff from my perspective and my experience, and then you actually go read Kimberly Crenshaw's Critical Race Theory. I suggest you go read Richard Delgado's Critical Race Theory. In fact, on Chalkboard Review, we have this thing called a Critical Race Theory Toolkit. We have all of the scholars, all the way from Derek Bell and Marcuse, all the way up to Ibram X. Kendi. Go read their stuff, and then read a real author that talked about individual issues and then provided some perspective with tons of data, like Thomas Sowell is the best author that I could recommend to talk about this. So I would recommend 2 books by Thomas Sowell specifically. I would recommend Discrimination and Disparities. And then, and this is one of the greatest books that I've read because it disconnects culture from color. And that's incredibly important, and I think doesn't get stated enough in this country. And a lot of people at my work certainly disagree with me about this, but this is by Thomas Sowell. It's called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And it is,
That's a good book.
It is a phenomenal book because it starts talking about the Indianapolis Civil Rights Movement, which is what a lot of people take completely out of context. And he digs right into it. So when it comes to valuing American culture and actually like digging into what's something that we should be talking about, instead of just using people as color pawns, that's really what I would suggest. So go read the critical race theory stuff. Don't take my word for it. I mean, in the video, I say certain things are verbatim. Check me up on that. Seriously, go read it for yourself and then read something from a guy who's been doing this for 60 years and who provides a lot more data than Kimberly Crenshaw ever did.
Right. And I know that you were kind of limited on time, Tony. Did you have time to answer a couple of questions from callers?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right. So guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put the link in the comments. If you want to come on, be sure to click on the link. Whatever questions you actually have to ask Tony, this is the time to do it. So just go ahead and click on the link. But man, so
That was great.
Yeah, definitely learned a lot in regards to it. Now, also, it's the Chalkboard Review, not Chalkboard Review, right?
Yeah, we haven't bought that one yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think GoDaddy currently owns the domain and they're holding it for like $1,500. So what are you gonna do?
So, make sure to go to the Chalkboard Review. There you'll be able to get a lot of the information that Tony was actually talking about. Get access to the resources. Get your questions definitely, answered. Now, let me see here. I know that somewhat. No, there were a couple of people. Now also real quick from and this is kind of I don't know if it's exactly true. So this is from Serge from Washington. He had kind of said, I'll just read the way it says. Since CRT is really a symptom of the Marxist takeover of the education system, is there some sort of plan to eradicate it? If so, what is that?
Well, I do believe that critical race theory has very deep roots in Marxism. I used to not believe that. I used to think that was a Republican tinfoil hat conspiracy until I sat through racial equity training, and they were very explicit how Marxist they were and how capitalism was this tool of white men and being on time and having a nuclear family and quoting things from like a book are all like white things, which I thought was really insulting. So just again, the soft bigotry, the soft bigotry of low expectations, and just saying that these things that are decent things, well, black people could never do those. Those are just white things. Like gross. Yeah. And as for a solution to it, individualism and color blindness. I didn't say culture blindness. said color blindness. I'm a science teacher. I'm sorry. You and we can swap blood. We can share tissue cells, and you are in every single sense of the legal and proper fashion as much a human as me and me as you, period. And individualism, you're responsible for your own choices, and that I have a God-given responsibility to treat you as one of his kids. And that's what that means.
All right. So we have a couple callers on here. We'll go first to Jimmy X. Jimmy, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, where are you calling from, Jimmy?
I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. What did you have to ask Tony?
Well, Tony, I really didn't have a question, but I did want to thank you for coming on. I think you really cleared up some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The fake.
Can you turn your TV down a little bit?
Yes, I'm turning it down.
All right.
I think you really cleared up some of the fake junk that I know that I was thinking about critical race theory. You really made things very clear and very, you really cleared it up, and I appreciate that.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. That was about it. That's all I wanted to say. I'm really enjoying this. It's a great show.
Thank you. Keep things real down in Georgia for me.
I will.
All right, let's go to the next.
All right, let's see. We have Sharonda Simone.
Good evening, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much, first of all, to TNJ for just having the courage to host this show, because I think that it's very controversial. But my gosh, just listening here as a mother with children, in the public school system, it was very eye-opening. So thank you so much to the TNJ team and Mr. Kinnett. Thank you. You have been extremely, extremely helpful in just explaining the, I would say, subtle, issues, but actually they're blaring issues. So thank you so very much for just coming on and being transparent, and just know that here we are praying for you and your family. And I just encourage you to continue, whenever you have the opportunity, because you are very well spoken and you break it down very well. And I like the fact that you also encouraged all the listeners to do your own research. So I am definitely motivated to do that. I was not before, because it's actually a really scary topic to me as I have young kids in the school system. But just hearing you, break it down. And as a Christian, I know what I need to do to protect my family even more so. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on. All of my questions are already answered, actually, so I don't have any, but I just want to say thank you to all of you gentlemen. Really great show.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That was really encouraging. I can't wait to share that comment with my wife. And thank you very much for praying for us. It was already weird enough being the Christian science guy at IPS when a lot of other people, don't really want to see a Baptist Christian as your science director. But it's I tell you what, the encouragement that I've had from some really phenomenal Christians has just been, it's really touched us. Thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome.
And once again, for those who want to be able to check out Tony's information, go on to the chalkboardreview.com. And in the About Us, there's actually let me see if it's About Us or a contact. Yeah, there's a donation link on there. You can donate by way of PayPal or a credit card if you want to be able to support this organization, as well as it has, a lot of the information looks like on both sides of the argument, as well as, responses in regards to the critical race theory. I learned a lot just off of that website, a lot more than I knew.
Honestly, just really appreciate you guys having me on. Seriously, go look at Chalkboard Review, check out your own research, own studies. By all means, if you're a teacher out there and you have something to write, including the gentleman who just wrote, welcome to write for us. We publish articles from the left, the right, the center. We don't ask and we don't edit. As far as the political content of it, we are more than happy to post some of my favorite articles. Call me some very interesting names. And that we believe is, it's not my job to tell someone whether it's a good article or not. We believe it's our audience, it's the parents, it's other teachers who should be able to decide whether an article is good or bad. So submit something to us. If you're a teacher, if you're an educator, if you're a coach, hop one article right in. You'll find that on our contact page.
All right. Tony Kinnett, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Oh man,
Wow.
that was really good, very informative, especially when Social Climate came on and Jimmy X asked good, they chimed in, said some good stuff. But yeah. So you want to you say your last words and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, just like we had said, there's our kids, a war for our kids. And this is just one of the pegs, so to say, in regards to different institutions, the education, and future shows we'll be having discussions in regards to the other things that actually affect our kids, affect our families, whether it has to do with violence in the later ages or violence before the child's actually born, namely abortion. We will also be covering different things as far as sexuality, gender studies. We're going to go through the gamut. So this is going to be an ongoing series. We'll touch maybe once a month, but I'm glad that we were able to, get Tony on, and we'll just put on a quick word from one of our sponsors. You able to put that on, Ron?
Yeah. Yep. And while I'm doing that, definitely hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and also share this information. Check out one of our sponsors, afjcworldwide.com. That is afjcworldwide.com for our latest apparel, homeware, and drinkware. Definitely get a shirt for your husband, wife, doesn't matter. Again, check out afjcworldwide.com. Want to get that? Let's go, Brandon. Definitely go hit that site, afjcworldwide.com. And we are out.
Peace.